Hello, my dear students. I hope all of you feel good. I'm M.Nada, and today we are gonna study the first lesson of Unit 1, which is friction force. When you slide down on a slide, لما تيجي تتزحلق على الزحليقة, there will be a touch. بيبقى في touch between your body and the slide. Okay, when a car moves on a road, لما العربية بتكون ماشية في الطريق. Also, there will be a touch between the car tires and the road. When I ride the bike, also there will be a touch between the bike tires and the road. What about when we rub our hands together? When we rub our hands together, we feel warm. And also there is touch between our hands. This touch between each two surfaces in the previous examples is a type of force. يعني في كل examples دي كان في touch between two surfaces. مرة between my hands, مرة between the car tires and the road, مرة between my body and the slide. All these examples is an example of a force or a type of force. This force is called friction force. Then, what is the definition of the friction force? Friction force is the force between two surfaces in contact. In contact means that these two surfaces touch each other, that acts in a direction opposite to the direction of the object motion. يعني الفريكشن فورس دي has a direction بيبقى ليها اتجاه. طب what is the direction of the friction force? It's in opposite direction to the motion direction. For example, if I have a ball and I kicked the ball, then there will be a touch between the ball surface and the ground surface. Then there will be a force between these two surfaces called the friction force. Okay, what is the direction of this type of friction force? It's in opposite direction. يعني if I kick the ball to the right direction, the friction direction will be in the opposite direction, to the left. Okay? Then again, the friction force is the force between two surfaces in contact that acts in a direction opposite to the direction of the object motion. And this force causes the object to slow down and stop. مش احنا لما بنيجي نعمل كيكد للبول نشوط الكورة. After some time we found that the ball stopped. بنلاقي ان الكورة وقفت. طب ايه السبب؟ Why that happened? That happened because of the friction force. يبقى الفريكشن force causes the object to slow down. بتبطأ من حركة الأوبجكت until it stop. لغاية ما بتخليه يقف زي الكورة كده. Then again, if I ask you what is the definition of the friction force, what will you tell me? You will say that it's the force between two surfaces. لازم يبقى عندي two surfaces in contact that acts in a direction opposite to the direction of the object motion and causes the object to slow down and stop. Does the friction force have types? Yes, friction force have three types. The first type is friction between solid objects. يعني two surfaces اللي عندي بيبقوا الاتنين solid. The second type, friction between solid objects and air. The third type is friction between solid objects and water. Then again, what are the types of friction? Number 1, friction between solid objects. Number 2, friction between solid objects and air. In addition to number 3, which is friction between solid objects and water. Let's see some examples about the friction between solid objects. Like when I rub my hands together, here my hands are solid, then the two surfaces are solid objects. Also, when I ride a bike, here there is a friction between the bike tires, which is a solid, and the road, which is a solid also. Another example, when I slide down on a slide, there will be a friction between my body and the slide. When I ride a car or when a car moves on a road, also there will be a friction between the car tires and the road. Now we will transfer to another point, which is the factors affecting the friction force. Are there factors؟ هل في عوامل affecting the friction force بتأثر لي على friction force؟ يعني هل في حاجة ممكن تخلي friction force increases وهل في حاجة ممكن تخلي friction force decreases؟ Yes. There are three factors affecting the friction force. Number one, the type of the surface material. نوع الsurface اللي عندي. Number two, the speed of the body. Number three, the surface area of the moving. Again, the factors affecting the friction force. Number one, the type of the surface material. Number two, the speed of the body. Number three, the surface area of the moving. Let's understand each one of them. We will start with the first factor, which is the type of the surface material. The friction force affected by the type of the surface material. When the type of the surface material is rough, لما بيكون خشن, the friction force increases. And when the surface material is smooth, ناعم, the friction force decreases. Again, when the type of the surface material is rough, the friction force increases. And when it's smooth, the friction force decreases. Okay, now I will ask a question for my intelligent students. If I have two balls, one of them is in a sandy ground and another one in a ceramic ground, and I will ask you to kick them, do you think which one of them will have high friction force? Yes, excellent. The one which in the sandy ground will have high friction force. Why? Because the sandy ground is a rough surface. السطح بتاعها بيكون rough خشن. فالfriction force increases. But in the case of the ceramic ground is a smooth surface, so the friction force decreases. فيبقى عندها low friction force قليلة. Okay, if I ask you which one of the balls will stop first, مين اللي هتقف فيهم الأول؟ لو أنا عملت لهم kicked with my foot, which one of them will stop first? Yes, excellent. I hear your answers. The one which has high friction force will stop first. Why? Because we have known from the definition of friction force that the friction force causes the object to slow down until it stops. يعني بيبطأ من حركة الأوبجكت. عشان كده لما يبقى عندي high friction force فبيبقى عندي in small distance للبول. يبقى again احنا قلنا in the ball which in the sandy ground for rough surface بيبقى عندها high friction force, so it will stop first. هتقف الأول, هتمشي small distance and then it will stop. And the another ball which is in the ceramic floor على أرض مصنوعة من السيراميك will has more long distance. Why? Because the friction force بتاعتها is low, بتكون قليلة. Why? Because the surface of it is smooth. السيرفس بتاعها بيكون ناعم. Then again, the type of the material surface will affect the friction force. When I have a rough surface, the friction force increases, and when I have a smooth surface, the friction force decreases. The second factor is the speed of the body. If the speed of the body increases, لو كانت السبيد عالية أو عمالة بتزيد, the friction force increases. And if the speed of the body decreases, the friction force decreases. For example, if I have a car and if this car moves in high speed, then its friction force will increase. And if the car moves in slow speed or in low speed, then its friction force decreases. The third factor which is affecting the friction force is the surface area of the moving body. Surface area معناها مساحة السطح. يعني if the surface area of the body increases, the friction force increases, and if the surface area decreases, the friction force decreases. Let's have an example to understand more. If I have two balls again, one of them is small, which means that its surface area أو مساحتها is small صغيرة, and another one is big, يعني surface area of it is large or is high. Which one of them will have high friction force? Excellent. The one which is big. The big ball will have high friction force. Why? Because it's big. So its surface area is large or is high, then the friction force of it is high. What about the another ball? The another ball, its surface area is small, then its friction force is small. So if I ask you, which one of them will stop first if I moved them? لو أنا حركتهم تفتكروا أني واحدة هتقف الأول؟ Excellent. The big ball. Why? Because the big ball has high friction force. عشان كده هتقف الأول. But the another one will stop secondly or will take high distance until it stops. Then what we have studied today is the definition of friction force, which is the force between two surfaces in contact that acts in a direction opposite to the direction of the object motion and causes the object to slow down and stop. Also, we have studied the types of friction, which are number 1, friction between solid objects, number 2, friction between solid objects and air, number 3, friction between solid objects and water. We only have studied the first type. We also studied the factors affecting the friction force, which is number 1, the type of the surface material, and we have known that when I have a rough surface, then the friction force increases, and if I have a smooth surface, then the friction force decreases. The second factor is the speed of the body. When the speed of the body increases, then the friction force increases, and when the speed of the body decreases, then the friction force decreases. The third factor is the surface area of the moving or of the motion. When the surface area increases, the friction force increases, and when the surface area decreases, then the friction force decreases.